Hi, my name is Eleanor. I'm 67, retired, and until recently I thought I was still part of my son's life. When I opened the wedding invitation, my name wasn't on the seating chart. Not as his mother. Not even as a guest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But that day I realized they didn't forget me. They chose to erase me. And that's when I decided if they won't set a place for me, I'll build a table of my own. She read the invitation 3 times, but her name was not anywhere near the seating chart. Eleanor's kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood, the kind of scent that lingered in cupboards long after the last pie had cooled. Outside, a mist clung to the window panes, blurring the bare branches of November trees. Her fingers, still stiff from the morning chill, held the heavy envelope like something fragile. The cardstock was thick, off-white, and elegant, Vanessa's taste, no doubt. She tilted the card under the light. There, in delicate lettering, the names Vanessa Lynn Caldwell and Lucas Edward Whitmore. Vanessa's name was larger, more stylized. Lucas's, her son's, was almost secondary. She traced it absently with her thumb, then looked again at the seating chart tucked behind the RSVP card. Table 1, bride's family. Table 2, bridal party. Table 3, friends from college. She moved slowly, eyes, searching for something that would ground her, reassure her. Parent table, perhaps, or simply mother of the groom. But nothing came. Toward the end, in a soft grey font, almost apologetic in its smallness, extended guests. That was all. Her mouth tightened slightly. It could be a mistake, a formatting issue, perhaps a misprint, a misplaced comma, or just a period where her name should have been. These things happen. She held the card closer, noticing a tiny blot of ink near the bottom right corner, as if someone had dabbed out a word and rewritten it. A last-minute change, maybe, or a decision reversed. She stood up, the chair legs creaking across the old linoleum. Her steps were quiet but purposeful as she walked toward the phone resting on the counter. She picked it up, thumb hovering over Lucas's number. But her gaze lifted, drawn to the small photo tucked under a magnet on the fridge. Lucas, no older than 10, clutching a science fair ribbon with both hands, beaming cheeks pink from pride. She remembered the day, the wind, the sound of leaves crunching beneath their feet as they walked home. The phone lowered slowly. Instead, she reached for the drawer where she kept bills and letters. Nestled among them was the email confirmation from the event planner. Eleanor had offered to cover part of the wedding, just the food she'd said. Nothing extravagant. Just enough to ease the burden. Vanessa had smiled politely, and Lucas had nodded. She clicked through the link embedded in the email, logging into the catering site. Her login details still worked. The auto-payment schedule was still active. Her credit card was still listed. $380. Charged yesterday. Eleanor closed the laptop with a soft click. The mist outside had thickened, turning the backyard into a gentle blur. The bare trees no longer looked like lace. They looked like bones. She returned to the table and took up a pen, nothing dramatic, just a blue ink roller, and wrote in small, measured letters along the margin of the invitation. "Whose seat is it, really?" She didn't say it aloud. The question lived only in ink. She folded the card again, tucking it back into its envelope, then walked to the hallway. In the bottom drawer of an old dresser, she found her mother's jewelry box, oak, worn a tiny brass clasp, bent from years of use. She placed the envelope inside, closed the lid, and sat on the edge of the bed. The scent of cinnamon lingered faintly in her clothes. She listened to the ticking of the wall clock each second, pacing gently towards something not yet spoken. The menu was exquisite. The guest list was glamorous. The absence was deafening. Eleanor stood at the entrance of the garage, fingers brushing against the light switch that never quite worked right. A dim bulb flickered above, humming softly, casting long shadows across stacked file boxes and a folded treadmill no one had used since 2014. The air smelled of cardboard and old receipts, a little like wet newsprint, and something metallic underneath. She moved slowly toward the back wall, where the tax records lived neatly labeled folders, yellowing tabs, years of careful budgeting and paid dues. Her knees bent with a slight creak as she opened the box marked Lucas. Wedding. Inside, spreadsheets, catering quotes, linen rentals, flower arrangements. Neatly printed estimates, some of them highlighted in green. Her notes in the margins confirm guest count Vanessa's vegan preferences, balance due, oct. 15. She had handled most of it, quietly, without asking for anything but decency. She picked up a printout labeled Financial Breakdown, Draft 3, its edge curling slightly from humidity. Her eyes followed the columns Eleanor M. Whitmore, 78% of total budget. The total was circled in red pen. A car passed outside. Its engine faded. Silence returned. Eleanor sat on a folded lawn chair, the metal cold through her sweater. She remembered the wedding planning session 3 months ago, held at a trendy cafe downtown. Vanessa had been radiant, full of ideas, flipping through Pinterest boards on her iPad. "Let us take care of everything," Vanessa had said brightly. "You don't have to worry about it." Eleanor had nodded, sipping lukewarm tea, her offer to help with music or decorations gently brushed aside. Lucas had smiled vaguely, as if the conversation bored him already. A soft vibration startled her. Her phone buzzed on a nearby shelf screen, glowing with Lucas's name. She picked it up quickly, only a voicemail. His voice, a little distant. "Hey, Mum. Vanessa's really stressed right now, okay? Don't worry too much about the invite. We'll talk soon, all right, love you." Eleanor stared at the phone after the message ended. "We'll talk soon." As if silence had no consequence. She exhaled, then scrolled through her contacts. "Nina Tran," she murmured, tapping the name. A few rings, then Nina's crisp voice. "Eleanor. It's been a while." "I need a favor," Eleanor said. "It's about a catering contract." There was a pause on the other end. Not surprise, not hesitation. Just the weight of understanding between two women who had filed too many papers and read too many terms and conditions to ignore red flags. "If you want," Nina said slowly, "I can review it for you. Quietly. No charge." Eleanor didn't answer at first. Her fingers grazed a photograph tucked under a pile of receipts, Lucas in high school mouth, full of braces, standing awkwardly in front of the fall carnival booth she'd built by hand. He'd won Best Presentation. She'd cried in the car afterward, not from pride, but from exhaustion and joy. She slipped the photo back in and closed the lid. "I don't need my son to apologize," she whispered into the phone. "I just want to know, when did they delete me?" She stood in the back of the rehearsal dinner, unnoticed, uninvited, and unforgettable. The garden twinkled under soft golden lights, candles floating in glass bowls on each table. A soft breeze rustled the late autumn ivy lining the wooden trellis. A string quartet played something gentle, forgettable, and the welcome Vanessa and Lucas sign hung above a rose-covered arch, backlit in warm blush tones. Eleanor stepped in quietly through the side gate. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't expected. But she came anyway, a navy shawl wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Her heels clicked softly on the stone path, each step deliberate. Nina had said, "This Saturday is the rehearsal dinner. You might come just to observe. Observe, not confront. Watch, not weep." She found a chair at the very end of the garden, half shadowed by an olive tree far from the head table. No one looked twice. Waitstaff floated past her like she was part of the furniture. She sat down and folded her hands in her lap, watching her son across the distance. Lucas wore a pale grey suit. His back was straight, his smile practiced. He moved like a groom should, pausing for photos, whispering something to Vanessa as they passed the dessert table. But he never turned toward the olive tree. Not once. Vanessa wore ivory fitted and glowing. Her hair pinned high, she radiated confidence. At one point, she embraced her mother, a tall woman in pearls and pastel silk, and whispered something into her ear. The two women laughed. Eleanor could not hear the words. She didn't need to. A server passed with champagne. Eleanor declined with a quiet shake of the head. Her eyes moved to the musicians as they shifted songs, something brighter now. It took a moment before she recognized it. Ain't No Mountain High Enough. She'd sung it to Lucas when he was barely 2, bouncing him on her knee in their tiny apartment. He'd giggled every time she hit the high notes. They used to play the song during bath time. She remembered the bubble beard he made once and how proud he was of the foam crown. And here it was, at his wedding rehearsal, sung for strangers, played for a bride who didn't know its origin. Vanessa stepped forward with a microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, voice bright, flawless. "This wedding is a celebration not just of us, but of family, of love that raised us." She reached for her parents' hands. "To my mother and father, thank you for everything. I am who I am because of you." Eleanor did not blink. She barely breathed. Lucas stood beside his bride, nodding. He didn't say a word. Eleanor rose before dessert was served. Her steps were steady. No one called her back. No one asked where she was going. She passed Nina at the far end of the garden. Nina nodded silently, a small leather notebook in hand. No words exchanged. Only the weight of shared understanding. Near the valet, a little girl in a pink dress ran up to one of the side tables, pointing at the last empty chair. "Why doesn't this chair have a name tag?" she asked, looking around. Her mother hushed her gently and led her away. Eleanor paused at the gate. The question hung in the air like perfume. That night back home, she pulled her diary from beneath the sofa cushion. The same pen, blue ink, slightly faded. She wrote in long, careful strokes, each word, taking up its full space on the page. "If they don't let me sit, I'll redo the table." She never learned to lie, but she had learned how to keep receipts. The yellow desk lamp cast a small circle of warmth across Eleanor's desk. Outside, the sky pressed close to the window, grey and swollen. She reached for a folder labelled Wedding 2022, worn at the edges. Inside were envelopes of varying sizes, a mixture of typed letters and curled receipts. Her hands moved methodically like they used to when balancing payroll at the firm, steady, patient surgical. She turned over the first receipt. The deposit for the wedding hall paid with her own credit card. The date was circled. Her signature, familiar and careful, sloped gently across the bottom. Not gifted, not offered, just used. Beside her, the small printer whirred quietly, ejecting freshly printed bank statements. Eleanor picked them up, scanning each line, cross-referencing numbers with her handwritten notebook. 780 designer orchids, she murmured. The florist's name, embossed in gold at the top of the invoice, rang a bell. Vanessa had admired their arrangements, once said they were iconic. Now it seemed they were also expensive, and not reimbursed. The red pen clicked softly as she marked another line. Her email pinged. From Nina Tran, subject redocumentation, body start, by taking an inventory of your papers. Each invoice is a piece of your voice that has been taken away. Eleanor stared at that sentence. She reread it twice. She replied, "I don't want to sue. I just want to know where I am on the map of my own family." She paused before clicking send. A moment later, she opened another envelope, a copy of an email Lucas had forwarded weeks ago unintentionally. Subject line: Final planning notes, confirmed budget. In it, Lucas addressed the wedding planner, and Vanessa using words like "our sponsor, the contribution from E," and "it's handled." Not my mother, not even Eleanor, just E, as if her presence had been reduced to an initial and a bank account. She leaned back, her eyes moving across the room to the stack of shoeboxes by the closet. She had kept every card he'd made as a child, every report card, every thank you note from preschool teachers who marveled at how he held a pencil. And now he couldn't hold a place for her at his own wedding. Another document caught her eye. Folded in thirds, filed among catering receipts, the original wedding contract. She unfolded it slowly, running her fingers along the heavy paper. Near the bottom, in blue ink, co-funder Eleanor M. Whitmore signature. She stared at her own name. Co-funder, not donor, not guest, not even mother of the groom. The red pen in her hand trembled slightly. She set it down. Her phone rang. Nina again. "If you want," Nina said gently, "I'll contact a lawyer about withdrawing the funding. It's early enough." Eleanor said nothing. She folded the file, slowly smoothing the crease with the side of her hand. The paper made a soft final sound, like a curtain falling at the end of an act. A seat can be taken away, but dignity must be surrendered. She hadn't. The calendar on Eleanor's kitchen wall had always been a place of birthdays and garbage days, appointments penciled in, groceries listed in cursive. But now it held a red circle around a date, Saturday the 12th. Underneath, she'd written "countdown to invisibility," a half joke, a quiet truth. The air was brisk as she stepped into the cafe that afternoon, 17 days before the wedding. The bell above the door chimed a soft note. Inside, it smelled of baking cinnamon rolls and old books. The windows fogged gently, collecting condensation at the corners. It was here months ago that she and Nina had first met by accident, both reaching for the last blueberry muffin. Now they sat by the window again, not as strangers, but as women who had learned to count the cost of silence. Eleanor slid a folder across the table. "These are all the documents, the receipts, the signed agreements, email printouts." Her voice was even. She took a sip of coffee. It had gone lukewarm, but she didn't mind. Nina opened the folder carefully, as if it contained something breakable. Her eyes moved quickly across the pages. "You don't want to sue," she said quietly, "but you want them to stop treating you like a ghost." Eleanor nodded. "I funded the wedding. That doesn't make me entitled to affection, but it should make me visible." Nina leaned back. "If you withdraw funding, it won't be a delay, it'll be a collapse. Venues, catering dresses, they'll all unravel." Eleanor looked out the window. A young couple crossed the street hand in hand, their coats fluttering behind them. She wondered if they too would one day forget who folded the invitations or baked the cake. Janice, the cafe owner, paused by their table, setting down a slice of butter cake. On the house, she smiled. "I remember you once made your own wedding cake. Lemon and rosewater, right?" Eleanor blinked, surprised. "Yes." "You remember?" Janice chuckled. Some things are hard to forget. When Janice left, Nina tapped the folder gently. "You have 3 options: sue, warn, or keep quiet. But I'll help you if you choose to have a voice." The hum of the cafe returned. A spoon clinked against porcelain somewhere behind them. Outside, the wind caught a loose napkin and tumbled it down the sidewalk. Eleanor drew in a breath. "I want to send a letter. Not a threat, not a demand. Just a confirmation of my role. Financially, legally, Emotionally, if that still matters. Nina smiled softly. That matters more than they realize. They sat in silence for a while. The butter cake slowly disappeared between sips of tea and lines drawn in the margins of a letter draft. Nina circled phrases. Eleanor crossed out entire paragraphs. Finally, the shape of it emerged, a voice neither angry nor begging, just clear, steady, present. As they stood to leave, Nina gathered the folder and asked one last question. What if they don't respond? Eleanor slipped on her coat, smoothing the collar with practiced fingers. Her eyes were tired, but not uncertain. I have chairs, she said calmly. If they don't let me bring them in, I'll set up a table. They received the letter. They opened it. They said nothing. The confirmation came in by email. Nina had sent a scanned copy of the signed delivery receipt. It bore the stamped signature of someone at Lucas and Vanessa's apartment front desk. The letter had been delivered 3 days ago. There was no mistake, no confusion, no wrong address. And yet, nothing. Eleanor sat in the library's quieter wing that Sunday afternoon, 10 days before the wedding. The wooden chairs here creaked faintly with every shift of weight worn by decades of bodies that came to learn or escape. A yellow pool of lamplight gathered on the table before her, illuminating a thick book titled Asset and Family Law Plain Terms Edition. It wasn't comforting reading, but she wasn't here for comfort. She flipped through a dog-eared page. Words like co-liability material contributor and conditional sponsorship danced before her eyes. She underlined one passage gently in pencil. It spoke of recourse when a contract was honored in silence, yet violated in practice. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Lucas, Mom, I want everything to be smooth. I hope you don't ruin my day. No greeting, no mention of the letter. Just a tone, thinly veiled threat wrapped in plea. Eleanor stared at the screen, her lips tightening. She read it again, as if a second reading might reveal hidden kindness. A minute later, another ping. An email this time. From Vanessa H., subject, re-sponsorship questions. Body. This is not the time. That was it. No hello, no thank you. No acknowledgement that thousands of dollars had moved quietly from Eleanor's account to florists, caterers, dressmakers. Silence had weight now. It was no longer absence. It was weaponry. Nina called that evening. They're ghosting you, she said without ceremony. Legal ghosting. It's passive power. They're hoping you'll feel awkward enough to stay quiet. Eleanor was quiet for a beat. Then, what happens if I really stop sponsoring? There was a shuffle of papers on Nina's end. I'll connect you to Meredith. She's handled family sponsor withdrawals before. Quietly. 2 days later, in the same library, but a different chair, Eleanor met Meredith on a video call. The screen flickered slightly. Meredith wore glasses, her voice slow and clear. If you were really the one who signed the contract, she said, tapping a printed copy on her desk, then you have the legal right to freeze further payments. And because the schedule is tightly packed, it would ruin the wedding in about 48 hours. Eleanor said nothing. She looked down at her notebook where she had written, "What do I really want?" in small, faded cursive. She finally spoke, voice low. I don't want to cancel the wedding. I just want them to remember I was there. There was a pause on the call. Then Meredith said, "It doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be the right time." The florist smiled when Eleanor asked for a reprint of the invoice with her name on it. It was an ordinary Monday. The air was cool and clear. The sun filtered through amber leaves, and downtown buzzed with preparations. Flower shops lined the narrow street, their windows bursting with bouquets for celebrations Eleanor would never attend. She walked past them slowly, her folder clutched beneath her coat like a soft shield. Inside the flower shop, the scent of lilies and eucalyptus mingled in the warmth. The woman at the counter recognized her. "Oh, Mrs. Whitmore. You came with the tall woman, the one choosing white peonies and soft gold accents." Eleanor nodded gently. "Vanessa." The woman nodded back, searching her records. "Yes. August 2nd. Here we are. Shall I reprint the invoice for your files?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "Please include the billing name exactly as it was then." The woman tapped a few keys, then smiled. "Eleanor M. Whitmore? You covered the deposit. It's all here?" Eleanor folded the paper carefully, as if it were a page from a history book she was still learning to read. Next stop, the wedding dress studio. A receptionist greeted her bright-eyed. "You were here during the color consultation, right?" she asked. Eleanor paused. "I helped choose the champagne ivory," I remember the receptionist said. "You had strong opinions about fabric that wrinkles." Eleanor smiled faintly. It was strange being remembered by strangers for decisions now erased by family. After that, she sat in the passenger seat of Janice's aging Subaru. The heater groaned faintly, and the dashboard rattled whenever the car hit a bump. Janice handed her a cup of lukewarm tea in a travel mug and said nothing until they reached the quiet end of the street. "You made those hand-laced napkins yourself, didn't you?" Janice asked softly. "Yes," Eleanor replied. "Every stitch was part of a weekend I wanted to be remembered." Janice nodded, eyes still on the road. Maybe they want to keep everything beautiful, but they forget that beauty doesn't come from erasing the person who built it. Back home, the golden light poured across Eleanor's old dining table. The folder she had started weeks ago now bloomed with contents. Each receipt had its own corner, each invoice its date. The napkin sketch of the table layout, the menu corrections in her handwriting, a floral deposit slip, a memory on paper. She flattened the last sheet, aligning it with care. Then she whispered into the quiet room, "If I were only a shadow, I would let them see that shadow has proof." She pulled a red pen from the drawer, the same one she'd once used to grade tax returns and label photo albums. On the folder's front flap, she wrote in steady, clean script, "The wedding without the mother." If they wouldn't set a seat for her, she'd set a table of her own. 4 days before the wedding, Eleanor stood in the middle of her backyard, sleeves rolled up scarf knotted at her throat. The air held a crisp clarity, October's final breath before giving in to November chill. Around her, the yard looked modest but tended. A large oak tree, older than Lucas himself, anchored the space, its leaves scattered like copper memories on the grass. She chose the spot beneath the tree. The roots had lifted the soil in gentle waves, but the ground was firm, honest. Like everything she planned now. The table was old, reclaimed wood, 6 feet long, and had once been part of her father's garage bench. She and Janice carried it out in pieces, reassembling it slowly. Screws were tightened, sandpaper brushed away the years. They draped a linen cloth over the surface cream with delicate blue stitching, and then began pinning lace around the edges. Eleanor's fingers worked steadily, her breath, even her heart, not angry, but firm. "Do you want flowers?" Janice asked, pausing with a spool of ribbon in hand. "No arrangements," Eleanor replied. "Just what's in the garden. Things that grow because they belong." A small bundle of rosemary marigolds and lemon thyme was tucked into a glass jar at the table's center. No centerpiece needed height. It only needed roots. In the house, her computer pinged with new mail. Nina had sent a message attaching a PDF. Subject, final notice. Sent body. "Dear Eleanor, the letter has been delivered." It reads, "Due to the absence of acknowledgement or cooperation, Eleanor M. Whitmore formally withdraws financial sponsorship, effective immediately. Eleanor nodded at the screen. There was no anger in her chest, only clarity. She opened another tab and began typing a new invitation. It wasn't a formal card, just a short note in her own words. Dear friends, on Saturday I'll be hosting a small table under the oak. If you have ever held a place for me in your memory, you're welcome to sit with me. No speeches, just tea music and quiet presence. With care, Eleanor. She sent it to 6 names. Lucas's old pediatric nurse, a former co-worker, 2 neighbors who still brought her rhubarb in June, and a classmate from high school who once taught Lucas piano. That evening, Eleanor printed the note and pinned a copy to the wooden gate of her backyard. In red ink, she wrote above it, "No revenge, just remembrance." As the sun dipped lower, she set up an old CD player near the tree. The disc inside was scratched, but playable, a piano piece Lucas had learned when he was 12, after weeks of struggling with the middle section. She remembered the morning he finally played it through, how he beamed, how she clapped even before the last note faded. Behind her, Janice leaned against the fence. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's honest," Eleanor replied. "That's what I want." The table didn't gleam. It didn't sparkle. But it stood, and every detail, wood-grain napkin corner, chipped teacup, held her name even if unspoken. Her phone rang. Nina's name on the screen. Eleanor answered, expecting silence. "They just answered," Nina said. Vanessa sent an email, 1 line. Eleanor waited. "If you stop sponsoring, the wedding is off." The wedding was off. But the silence was still on. The sun rose on a Saturday that was meant for something else. Eleanor stood in the backyard, smoothing a crease from the tablecloth, the same one Janice had helped her pin lace onto just days ago. The old oak tree stood tall behind her, a gentle breeze brushing its leaves across the grass in quiet applause. The other table was ready. There was cake, a lemon sponge she'd baked the night before, dusted lightly with powdered sugar. A small stack of mismatched porcelain plates rested beside it, each with a faint chip or floral edge. A bouquet of marigolds and wild lavender stood in a vase sun, catching their golden hues. Guests arrived without ceremony. First came Helen, a retired teacher who had once carpooled with Eleanor to PTA meetings. Then Mr. Lynn, the postman, who said little but handed her a jar of honey with a nod. An old nurse from Lucas's early years brought a photo album and asked before sitting, "May I call you Ellie?" Like back then, Eleanor smiled. "You always could." Janice lit the small citronella candles, not for bugs, but because the soft scent reminded Eleanor of summer nights from long ago. A portable speaker played a quiet instrumental version of a song Eleanor once hummed while rocking Lucas to sleep. There were no toasts, no speeches, only the steady murmur of remembered names and stories, a table of voices that had not forgotten where she belonged. I never got an invitation from Vanessa. Someone said gently, passing a plate, but I got it from her, so I came. No one spoke of what didn't happen today. No one asked about Lucas. It wasn't necessary. The sound of laughter, soft, real, aged, rose and faded like the rustle of the leaves above. Someone passed around an old yearbook. Someone else remembered a forgotten birthday gift Eleanor once sent decades ago. At the edge of the table, Eleanor's phone lit up. A single new email. The subject line read, "Why did you do that, Mom?" She didn't open it. Didn't need to. Instead, Eleanor picked up her phone, walked a few steps back, and took a photo of the table. In it were chairs filled by those who had remembered to remember. Plates half full. Wrinkles, silver hair, and kindness. She typed a caption beneath the image before sending it not as a reply, but as a truth. To those who still remember. The message went to Lucas. Inside the house, Nina and Meredith sat at the kitchen table quietly sipping tea. They hadn't stayed long in the garden. Their role today wasn't among the memories, but around the next corner of protection. Meredith looked up from her phone. "They're talking about suing you," she said, "claiming you ruined the wedding." Eleanor folded her napkin with careful fingers, then placed it beside the cake plate. She looked up at Meredith with a softness that didn't need words. And she smiled. Lucas finally called. But he didn't say sorry. He said, "You ruined everything." The phone rang once, then again. Eleanor hesitated, the soft hum of the living room clock ticking louder in her ears. Outside, birdsong filtered through the open window. Afternoon light cut sharp angles across the carpet, brushing the armchair where she used to read aloud to Lucas every Sunday. She answered, voice level. "Hello." Lucas didn't say her name. Didn't ask if she had a moment. He just launched into it. "You didn't have to embarrass us. You didn't have to ruin it all." Eleanor gripped the base of the receiver. "Lucas, no, Mom. You don't get it. Vanessa's devastated. Her parents are furious. This was supposed to be our day. What were you thinking?" Eleanor closed her eyes. The edge of the coffee table caught the sunlight like a blade. "I was thinking," she said quietly, "that maybe I shouldn't keep paying to disappear." There was silence. Not the stunned kind, just a pause like someone skipping over words that didn't land. Lucas's tone sharpened. This wasn't about disappearing. You could have been there. You could have said something instead of pulling all this dramatic stuff. Hosting your own party, sending legal letters. That's not you. She stared at the photo on the mantel, the one with her and Lucas. He was 7, missing teeth clutching her waist like she was a fortress. He had written on the back once, "You are my whole world. Since when," she asked, "did you start hiding important things from me?" He exhaled sharply. "Things got complicated, Mum. You wouldn't have understood." Vanessa thought Eleanor interrupted, voice firm this time. "Vanessa didn't raise you." Lucas fell silent. There were a few quiet beeps. He'd switched to speaker maybe, or walked away from the phone. "Then I don't have time for this." And the call ended. Eleanor placed the receiver back on its cradle with both hands, slow and deliberate. She didn't cry immediately. The tears came later, soft, and without warning, spilling not from anger or blame, but the dawning of something lonelier. She had loved him fully, without receipt, without terms. But perhaps she had also made herself invisible little by little, by being quiet when she should have asked, by stepping back, assuming that love was understood without needing space or voice. The doorbell rang, a brief chime that pulled her back into the room. Janice entered, holding a small tray covered in foil. "I made that cranberry cake you like. Figured you could use something sweet." Eleanor nodded, wiped her cheek with her sleeve, and guided her friend into the kitchen. As Janice uncovered the tray, she noticed Eleanor's still face. "Was it Lucas?" she asked softly. Eleanor didn't answer. She just reached for a knife and made a clean slice down the center of the cake, the filling just starting to spill out. Janice watched her carefully, then murmured, "Maybe this isn't the first time they've excluded her. It's just the first time she's noticed." She didn't expect a knock. But when it came, it wasn't Lucas. It was Vanessa. The porch was quiet, shaded by the gentle lean of the afternoon sun. A breeze moved the chimes above the door, but Eleanor hardly noticed. She rocked slowly in her chair, the old wood creaking beneath her, a book unopened on her lap. She wasn't reading today. The knock came once, then again, softer. She stood slowly, not hurrying. There was no reason to. When she opened the door, she was met not by her son's unsure eyes, but by the familiar yet distant face of Vanessa. The woman held no flowers, no smile, no apology. "Hi," she said, her voice low, unsentimental. Eleanor stepped back, not in invitation, but simply to allow space. She didn't ask her in. Vanessa didn't move forward either. She looked down at her shoes, then back up. "I didn't come to apologize." Eleanor nodded once. "Good. I didn't expect it either." They stood like that, separated by a few feet and a world of silence. "I just want to understand why you did it," Vanessa finally said. "Why you had to do it that way." Eleanor looked past her out to the sidewalk to the street that once held her son's laughter on a tricycle to the mailbox he had painted with her one summer. Then she said evenly, "Because I was asked out of my son's life a long time ago. I just responded to that invitation." Vanessa blinked. It wasn't anger in her eyes. It was something more fragile. Maybe confusion. Maybe recognition. "You could have said something earlier," she said, but the words were weak even as they left her mouth. "I could have," Eleanor agreed, "but silence runs in our house, doesn't it?" The wind stirred again. Leaves brushed across the steps. No one moved. Vanessa took something from her purse, a plain white envelope. She held it out, not forcefully, not dramatically. "I'm leaving this," she said. "You can read it or not. I don't know if it helps. I don't even know if it's from me." Eleanor didn't take it. She just glanced at the envelope, then back to Vanessa's eyes. "Leave it on the table," she said, then went back inside without another word. The door didn't slam. It simply closed like a page turned in a book that might never be opened again. The envelope sat on the table for hours, untouched. The late light curved across its surface, warming the edges, making the paper look older than it was. Only when the stars began to appear did Eleanor return to the porch. She looked at the envelope. She didn't open it right away. She only sat again in her chair and listened to the crickets, to her own breathing, to a kind of space that used to be full of someone else's needs. Later, just before heading in for the night, she picked it up, opened the flap with her thumb. Inside, in neat, hurried handwriting, were the words, "I know I was wrong. But you never said anything. Is that also a mistake?" The table was still there. So was she. It had rained in the night. Not a storm, just a soft, steady whisper across the windows. Now in the morning, the light came filtered through a grey sky, brushing Eleanor's office in long diagonal streaks. The letter still sat on the table unopened, beside the dried hydrangeas in a chipped glass vase. Next to it, the cold cup of tea she had poured yesterday and never touched. She had let it rest there for almost 2 days. Not because she feared what was inside, but because she didn't know if opening it would take her backward or forward. Eleanor sat down in the old chair with the worn blue cushion, one she had reupholstered herself 15 years ago. Her hands reached for the envelope, like they already knew the weight of its contents. She opened it slowly. The words were simple. The handwriting, neither Vanessa's neat slant nor Lucas's loose sprawl, looked somewhere in between. "I know I was wrong, but you never said anything. Is that also a mistake?" Eleanor stared at the sentence for a long time. Her vision blurred. Then the tears came sudden clean, not jagged like before. Not from anger, not from grief. She cried because she saw a reflection of herself in the question. She had stayed quiet. Not once, but again and again. She had smiled through discomfort, paid bills she never discussed, stepped back so others could feel comfortable stepping forward. She folded the letter and set it down. Then slowly, she took out a blank sheet of paper. And she began to write. She wrote about the day Lucas first learned to walk, how he had taken 3 steps toward her, then immediately fell laughing into her arms. She wrote about his 7th birthday when he asked for a microscope and spent hours examining dead leaves, declaring them alien lands. She wrote about the night her father, Lucas's grandfather, had died and how Lucas had slept through it all. How she sat by the hospital bed alone and returned home to find Lucas had made her a card without knowing why. She did not blame. She did not accuse. Instead, she ended the letter with one simple line: "I don't need an apology. I just need an invitation anytime back into your life." She stared at the words, then folded the page, careful with its edges. She didn't seal it, didn't stamp it. Just placed it gently into the old wooden box in the corner of her shelf, the one that now held the wedding invitation. A few faded photographs, a small lace scarf she had once intended to wear to the reception. As she closed the lid, the room was quiet again. Not hollow, just still. The rain had stopped. The sky outside was beginning to lift silver, turning slowly to pale blue. Her phone buzzed. She hesitated. The message was short. No name. No preamble. "Can you come to dinner on Friday?" Beneath it, one small emoji. A chair. There was no plan, no speech. Just one extra chair and enough food for 3. The stew had been simmering since 4. Eleanor moved gently around the kitchen, not hurried, but not aimless either. The scent of cinnamon and onion mingled in the air, curling into the corners of the room like memory itself. Apple pie rested on the windowsill, not cooling, not warming, just existing. She didn't set the table right away. Instead, she dusted the edge of the 3rd chair, then stepped back, looking at the table as if to confirm something invisible was in place. At 6:42, the doorbell rang. She opened the door to Lucas holding a bottle of wine, the label faded but familiar. "You used to like this one," he said. Eleanor took it without comment, motioned for him to come in. The clink of the bottle as it met the countertop was the first sound between them. They didn't talk about the text, or the wedding, or the letter that might or might not have been written by him. Instead, Eleanor ladled stew into bowls. Lucas opened the wine. He poured gently. She handed him the folded napkins she had stitched long ago, cream linen soft from use. At 7:09, the door opened again. Vanessa stepped in quietly, eyes uncertain but without resistance. She held a small foil-covered tin. "Apple cake," she said, placing it on the counter next to the pie. "Just in case." Eleanor nodded once. Vanessa didn't speak more. She simply picked up a plate and placed it at the 3rd setting. Then, without prompting, helped arrange the forks, the glasses, the folded napkins. Janice came by briefly, only long enough to set a small vase of wildflowers on the edge of the windowsill. "Won't stay," she said cheerfully. "Just thought this room needed a bit of breathing." Eleanor touched her shoulder lightly as thanks. The meal began without a toast, without a script. Just spoons dipping chairs, creaking and quiet. They spoke of unimportant things. The neighbour's cat had finally had kittens, 3, all orange. The trees in the back alley looked ready to shed early this year. The new bakery on 7th Street made terrible bread, but excellent coffee. No one raised a voice. No one said sorry. No one asked for anything. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was not war either. Midway through dessert, Lucas put down his fork and looked at his mother. "I know you have the right to be unforgiving," he said. "But I didn't ask for it today. I just came for dinner." Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't need to. She poured another small splash of wine into his glass, refilled Vanessa's water, and picked up a second helping of pie for herself. The table didn't feel full, but it no longer felt empty. Afterward, the plates sat stacked in the sink, waiting. Vanessa stood, slowly picked up 2 dishes, and carried them to the sink without asking. She ran the water, gently turned once to glance at Eleanor, as if waiting for objection. Eleanor said nothing. Vanessa gets up to wash the dishes. The first time Eleanor lets someone else touch her plate without protesting. Not every chair is for someone else. Some are there to remind us of who we were. The dishes had been washed, the table wiped, the kitchen dimmed to silence. In the living room, only the lamp by the old armchair remained on. Its soft golden circle cast long, rounded shadows across the carpet. Eleanor sat in the rocking chair, wrapped in a shawl that smelled faintly of cedar and old summer breezes. Opposite her, the chair remained empty. Not the one Vanessa had used, not Lucas's, but the fourth. No one had touched it. No one had moved it. It sat where it always had, slightly angled as if someone had only just risen. She looked at it then, down at her hands. The skin on them was thinner than she remembered, but the memory came back sharp and full. There were 3 chairs once hers, Mr. Whitmore's, and the small booster seat for Lucas years ago, buckled and sticky with jam. Eleanor let her eyes blur, and time shifted. She saw it clearly, Lucas's 7th birthday. She had tried to bake a lemon cake. It had collapsed in the middle, uneven and pale. But Lucas had clapped his hands and declared, "It's perfect, because you made it." Her husband had laughed, taken a photo. She still had that picture. Still had the dented cake tin, too. The ticking of the clock returned her to the room. Eleanor leaned back, letting the creak of the chair fill the stillness. Her voice, when it came, was soft, barely louder than thought. "When did I disappear?" she asked aloud, but not to anyone. Was it when they grew up? Or when I forgot to grow up with them? No answer came, but she didn't expect one. She reached for the small diary on the side table, navy blue, cracked at the spine. The pen moved slowly but with purpose. The chair is not for anyone else. It is for me, when I need to remember that I am still present. She paused, rereading, then underlined "still present" once. Across from her, the chair didn't shift, but something about its presence felt different now, not waiting, not vacant, just there. Eleanor stood across the room and opened the side drawer of the old hutch. From within, she took out a frame wrapped in soft fabric. She didn't dust it, didn't straighten it. She simply set it with care in the center of the table. It was the photo from that birthday, Lucas laughing, a fork in hand, her husband blurry in the background. She didn't place it to display. She placed it just to see. Then she turned off the kitchen light and walked back into the living room. Her phone buzzed once. A message from Janice. "Tomorrow there is an old book fair. You promised to go that day. Is the promise still valid?" She wasn't looking for anything, but the old librarian said, "You're in the right aisle." The community library smelled of soft dust and ink. Not the sharp scent of new paper, but the kind of scent that held memory, slow, warm, a little tired. Eleanor stepped inside with Janice beside her, the two of them shaking off the light morning drizzle from their sleeves. "I remember this place having smaller chairs," Janice said with a chuckle. "No," Eleanor replied, eyes wandering over the wooden shelves we just used to have smaller backs. They split near the front table where new arrivals and worn classics stood shoulder to shoulder. Eleanor didn't plan to find anything. She walked more from habit than hope, fingertips brushing bindings, her breath falling into rhythm with the hum of murmuring conversations. It was in the third aisle near the cracked window, and a display of forgotten poets, that a spine caught her attention. Letters to a Son, first edition, pale blue cloth, cover gold foil lettering, faded but intact. She held it delicately, flipping to the second page. Her own notes weren't in it. This wasn't her copy, but the words were familiar lines she once whispered to a sleeping child. A voice interrupted. "Do you like that one?" Eleanor turned. A teenage girl stood nearby, arms full of thick paperbacks. "I'm trying to find something for my grandmother," the girl said. "She's not really into fantasy or love stuff." Eleanor smiled, tucking the book against her chest. "What does she like?" The girl shrugged. "Real things, I guess." "Then maybe start with stories that don't shout," Eleanor said. "Ones that remember more than they tell." The girl nodded thoughtfully. From behind the checkout desk, the librarian raised her head. Her glasses slipped down her nose. "Mum, if you like memoirs," she said, "we're taking entries for this year's Forgotten Voices contest." Eleanor blinked. Contest. The librarian handed her a small cream-coloured form. Autobiographical pieces. Short or long. Just true. Eleanor folded the form without a word, placing it into her coat pocket. Janice found her near the exit. "Anything good?" "A few things," Eleanor answered, eyes softer than before. That evening, the light in her living room spilled gently over the old table. Eleanor opened her laptop, a machine more often used for reading than writing, and placed it squarely in front of her. Her fingers hovered. Then, without hesitation, she began typing. "They said there was no seat for me, so I built a table." She paused, reread the line, and kept going. Somewhere between memory and now, the story had ripened. The screen glowed quietly in the soft night. Each word, not a demand, not a scream, just a record, a ping. Her phone buzzed face down beside her. She flipped it over and read Nina texts Lucas just filed for a stay of marriage. He said he wants to understand his mother before building a family. The chair wasn't for Lucas, not for Vanessa, not even for Eleanor. It was just open. Snow had not fallen yet, but the breath of winter could be felt in the way the light bent over the grass. The backyard glowed with strings of soft bulbs, their reflection caught in the polished surface of the old wooden table. Eleanor adjusted the wool scarf around her neck, then gently set down a white ceramic bowl of cloves and oranges at the table's center. Janice arrived first, carrying a paper bag with firewood and 2 knit blankets. "I thought we'd do candles," she said. "But this feels better." Together they lit the small fire pit Eleanor had dragged out from the shed. Its crackle warmed their knees. Eleanor walked into the house once returning with a small thin book bound in soft cream and stamped in gold hidden voices. Winter Anthology. She placed it on the table without comment, slightly askew, beside a folded napkin and a tin of almond cookies. The front gate creaked. Lucas stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a thermos. "Soup," he said without ceremony. Vanessa followed, carrying a tray of gingerbread still warm. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, or something else. They sat, no instructions needed, and silence wasn't heavy this time. Eleanor poured tea. Lucas ladled soup. Vanessa laid out plates. It wasn't a feast. It wasn't even reconciliation. But it was today. "I'm not sure I'm right anymore," Lucas said quietly, looking down at his cup. "But I'm sure you've never been wrong." Eleanor didn't smile, didn't cry. She just passed him a piece of bread. Vanessa's voice was hesitant. "Do you want to try again?" From the beginning, Eleanor shook her head gently. "No need to start from the beginning," she said. "Just from today." They ate slowly, conversation meandering whether Janice's new cat, a neighbour's faulty fence. The fire burned steady. As dusk deepened into evening, Eleanor went inside once more, and returned with one last chair. She set it next to the end of the table, aligning it gently, brushing off a speck of ash from the seat. No name tag. No ribbon. Just a chair. Lucas looked at her puzzled. She didn't explain. Janice nodded, understanding before anyone else. For whoever needs it, she said. They sat in silence a moment longer, not awkward, just open. Later, when the evening wind grew colder and the guests had gone, Eleanor returned to the table alone. She picked up the anthology and flipped it open, letting her fingers find the first page. There, in small serif font, was the dedication. To those who were uninvited, but came anyway. The extra chair remained not reserved, not labelled, just open. In reclaiming her place without demanding it, Eleanor reminded them, and perhaps the world, that quiet endurance can be a louder protest than any outcry. Justice may come late, but when it arrives, it sits down without asking for permission. No wall of forgetting can stand forever against the persistence of memory. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.